Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to GSD with Tanwa Part 2. So today is part 2, day 4, right? Part 2, day 4. So today we're gonna talk about reading literature, right? And for hold on, give me a second here as I do something. There you go. So for those of you who have been following this series, this is part 2, right? So part 2 again is trying to get you to be a better researcher. So in GSD part 1, we talk about how to be better at English, right? Because as a researcher, one of the most important skills that you could have is to have a good command of English, right? Be able to communicate and understand English very well. In GSD Part 2, we want you to become a better researcher. And so far, we have talked about what does it mean to have an interesting research project. Once you have a research topics, how do you know what would make it an interesting research project, right? And then we talked about accessing literature last week, right? Where do you find papers? How do you find interesting papers? How do you know if a paper is interesting? So today we're going to talk about once you have found a paper, right, and you start to read it, how to actually read a paper. And the most common problems that I have seen from researchers, especially really young ones, is that they don't know how to read a research paper in an effective manner. Right? Most of you will try to read a research paper from front to back, right? Just like a novel, right? Just like you reading Harry Potter or something. You start from the first page, first paragraph, and you read it paragraph by paragraph until the end of the research paper. Right? That is bad. That is really bad. What is worse is that you read it paragraph by paragraph, and then you get to a certain point in that paper that you don't understand, right? You maybe don't understand one equation, you maybe don't understand one argument that the author is making, and then you just kind of stop, right? You stop at that point and tell yourself that you will not continue reading this paper until you have understood what the author is saying, right? That is even worse than reading from the first page to the last page, right? So today we're going to talk about how do I, right? Because this is my experience sharing as a more experienced researcher, I guess, on how to read a research paper effectively, right? How do I read it as a person? So again, this is my tips and tricks. It might work for you, it might not work for you, but if you think you don't have your own style of reading yet, maybe try this out and see where it takes you. Okay. All right. So let me share the screen real quick. There. Boom, boom, boom. That one. All right. So for those of you who have followed me for a while, you know that there's one book that if any of you ask, what is the most important book that I have ever read in my life, one of the title that almost always come up is this book called How to Read a Book, which sounds really stupid, right? It's a book on how to read a book, right? If you don't know how to read a book, how can you read this book? But it's one of the most influential book in my life that has taught me not only how to read better, but how to actually understand better when you're trying to learn something, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about it today, but I would highly recommend that you get this book and try to read it if you have never done it before. Unfortunately, if your native language is Thai, this book has, as far as I know, this book has never been translated because this is the sort of book that is important enough but also boring enough that it will never get translated. So it's also a good practice for English for you, I guess, right? So the main point of this book is that there is no single way of reading, right? Some of you will probably have tried like speed reading or like reading effectively or like take notes while reading or a bunch of other stuff, right? The first main point of this book is that whenever you approach something that you want to read, there are more than one ways of doing it. In fact, for every reading material that you want to read, you should not approach it the same way. For some of the stuff, you want to go over it really fast. For some of the stuff, you want to take your time with it because it is important. Right? So there is no one single good method of doing it, but there are multiple methods that you can use. That was the first main point. The second main point is that every time you read something, right? Every time you read something, do not think of it as reading from a text, right? Because a piece of writing, what it actually is a method of communications from the other to you. It's just that the other wanted to communicate before you were ready to read it, right? So maybe the other was a Greek philosopher from thousands of years ago who wanted to communicate with you, but he or she couldn't, right? So so the other wrote something down instead. So now thousands of years later, when you're reading the writing, right, you actually are having a conversation with the other, right? You are always having a conversation with the other. Unlike a video communication like this, a video like this is not a two-way communication, right? It's not a conversation. This is for your consumption, right? This is like a movie. You sit down and then you listen to it. You watch it, you listen to it, right? But when you read, it has this like magical property of you taking your time in this conversation with the other, right? So every time you read something, think of it as having a good conversation with the other. Right? And if you have talked to many people, right? So of course, if you are a graduate student, you probably have talked to, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of people in your life. Some people are easy to talk to, right? Some people are hard to talk to. When you talk to some people, you feel like, oh, this person is at the same level as you. When you talk to other people, maybe sometimes you go, oh my God, that person is way too intelligent for me to understand. You just could not understand what that person is saying, right? So it's the same thing with reading materials, right? Some reading material is too easy for you, right? Like children books. You probably don't need to be reading children books anymore, right? Some books are at your level, and some books are way hard, right? Excuse me. It's way too hard for you to understand all of it, but at least you can understand some of it. So today we're gonna touch into like what to do when you have a reading material at your level and maybe at like a difficult level, right? And how do you determine which level is a piece of reading material in, right? Let's say you get a research paper. How do you know if that's like at your level or above your level? Right? So again, this book go into details about how to do that. So what I give you today is going to be a very short summary of what the book was saying. Right? So I would recommend you that you go out and get this book, maybe share it among yourself, or get electronics version and read through it because it's actually very eye-opening. Right? But this book, basically, what it's saying is that, like I said earlier, the first point of the book is that there are more than one ways of reading. Right? And most of you, when I say most of you, when you try to read a research paper, you go from the first page to the last one, right? And that's classify you in this second category, right? Inspectional. Right. So today we're gonna talk about the definition of all four types of reading, levels of reading. Sorry, all four levels of reading, and then we're gonna see which one will work best when you read a research paper. Right. So the first level of reading, elementary, right? Elementary reading is basically whether you could even understand that language. For example, if you don't speak German and I give you a German research paper completely written in German, obviously you will not be able to understand it. right? So that's like the very basic elementary reading, and this is basically, do you recognize the alphabet? Do you recognize the words? Right? I'm not talking about technical terms. I'm talking about basic words in English. So obviously, if you can get into graduate schools and you are listening to me right now, you are way beyond the first level of reading, right? So we will not touch on that because that's not our point. But when people talk about education system and how can we teach children to read and write better, they usually mean level 1 of reading, right? And that's why it's so unfortunate, because we only talk about how to read at the first freaking level of reading, right? At the elementary level of reading. And after that first level of reading, we were never taught how to read ever again after that. So that's why most of you have never developed reading skills that is beyond the first level of reading, right? And that's why I highly recommend this book. I might get a commission from recommending. I'm just kidding. I don't get commission from shit. But right. So fortunately, you're now talking to me. So I'm trying to convey to you the other 3 levels of reading that will help you a lot in your reading skills. Right. The second level of reading, inspectional. Right. Some of you might have known this level of reading as skim reading, SKIM, right? Skim reading, but it's actually more nuanced than that. Right? It's actually more important than that. More important than that. Most of you, when you think of skim reading, you think of grabbing a book, right, and then just kind of flip through it. Yeah, let me get my prop. Give me a second. See, I'm prepared. Maybe. So I don't know. I don't know what book this is. I don't know if it's good or not. It's just kind of sitting around in this meeting room right here. So I'm just going to use it as an example, right? So most of you, when you think of skim reading, you just kind of think of like grabbing a book and then just kind of flip through it, right? And then you just go, oh, okay, this book is about something. And then you go done, right? That's your idea of skim reading, which is absolutely wrong. So inspectional reading is a much higher level than that, right? There's actually a method to and an objective to inspectional reading, right? And this will be really relevant when you think about reading a research paper, right? Inspectional reading, the first goal of inspectional reading is to determine the level of the writing, right? When you do inspectional reading, you're trying to see whether the research paper is too easy for you, at your level, or above you, right? So again, this is a conversation, right? There's no shame in having some piece of writing that is too difficult for you to understand. It's like talking to a smart person, right? A person who is way more educated than you, way smarter, way more intelligent than you, right? So inspectional reading, the first goal is to determine whether that reading will take a lot of time to understand, because it might be above your level, right? So once you know that the level of reading, then you can think about whether you have enough energy at that time or enough concentration at that time, enough willpower to actually finish the whole thing, right? So notice how different that is from what some of you might be doing. Some of you will get a research paper and then just go, oh, the title is interesting, I'm just going to go from the first page to the last page, right? What if that paper is super fucking hard? And now you're stuck with it, right? So maybe the paper is so hard that it would take you 8 hours for you to understand, but you only have half an hour between waiting for the bus and getting off the bus, right? So obviously that half hour will not be enough, right? So that's the first goal of inspectional reading. You want to know the level of difficulty of that piece of writing, right? The second goal of inspectional reading is for you to know what the research paper, what the writing is about, right? So there are many ways to do that. The first and obvious way is to read the title of the book or the research paper, right? So let me pull up that example research paper that I have given you in the line chat room. If you hear not from the line chat room, the link to this paper is in the video description, right? So I'm gonna step through this and give you, actually, let me give you the PDF version. There you go. Because there's an important lesson here somewhere that I will talk to you in a little bit. So again, the first objective is to find the level of difficulty of this paper, right? The second objective is to see what this paper is about and whether you want to even read it to begin with. So for this example, I'm going to pretend to be a graduate student in maybe hotel management, right? Maybe I'm doing a study in how to predict hotel demand or how to manage hotel demand. Right? Let's say I'm from the business side of a hotel business, right? So I don't know mathematics, I don't know modeling, I don't know physics. I am from the management side of the business, right? But I know that hotel demand management is such an important aspect of a hotel business that I need to truly understand it. So I go on Google Scholar or whatever, and then I, Google this paper up, and this paper came up. And now I want to know whether this paper will be too hard for me or not, right? Or whether this paper will be something that I'm interested in or not, right? So the first thing you're going to do for inspectional reading is that you're going to read the title. Right? So the title is Modeling and Forecasting Hotel Room Demand Based on Advanced Booking Information. Let me switch the screen real quick. Give me a second here. I'm going to go to the PDF. There. All right. So the title of the paper is Modeling and Forecasting Hotel Room Demand Based on Advanced Booking Information. Right. So right off the bat, just from the title, I see modeling and forecasting. So I know that it's going to be very mathematical. Right? So right off the bat, I go, this paper will be too difficult for me. Right? So again, I'm pretending to be from the business side. I'm not saying all business people are like bad in mathematics. I'm just saying stereotypically, business management people are not as good in mathematics as the freaking statistician. So the business side of the people will read the title and go, oh, modeling. So that's obviously going to have mathematics. That's obviously going to be too hard for me. So right off the bat, just from the title, I know that I will not be able to finish this paper from the first page to the last page on the first reading, right? It is not possible. And if I want to do that, if I want to finish from the top to the bottom, it will take me hours, if not days, if not weeks, right? Because I am not mathematical, right? But should I stop reading then? Of course not. Of course not, right? That's the point of inspectional reading. The second goal, again, is to know what the paper is saying, roughly, right? I'm not trying to understand everything. I just want to know what it's about. Right? Maybe it's talking about rabbits, I don't know, or cow fermentation, I don't know. But I want to know what is in it roughly, right? I'm not trying to understand it. So again, you go from the title, and then the next thing you want to look at is the structure of the research papers. And I'm going to tell you right now that you all with internet connection right now is so freaking lucky. Because for every research paper that comes in PDF format, especially from really good journals, what they're going to have is this fantastic table of content on the left, right? So the next thing that you want to look at is the structure of the paper. Notice that I haven't even started reading the paper, right? So I go from the title and then to the structure. So from the structure, I go modeling and forecasting hotel room demand based on advanced booking information. And then you go into introduction, literature review, model development, result, conclusion, blah, 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 which is a typical, very standard format for a research paper. One thing that I'm going to tell you right now, you can almost always skip the introduction. And I will tell you why in a little bit, right? Just skip the introduction. Because the introduction is the most predictable part of any research papers, right? When you read a research paper, if it's a research paper on climate change, it will talk about why climate change is so important, why we haven't done enough, and why we should do something about it. If it's a paper about global economics, if we talk about how important global economics is, how we have to work together to create like a world that is better for everyone. Like introduction is always freaking predictable, right? So it gives you almost no value at the inspectional level of reading. Okay. So then you go into literature review, and then you go, okay, in the literature review part, you see hotel demand forecasting, and then you see non-homogeneous Poisson process and Poisson mixture models. At this point, if you're not mathematical, you should go, crap, I will not understand this paper. And you're probably right? But you know immediately that this paper wants to talk about this hotel demand forecasting, and the method they're going to use is this NHPP and Poisson mixture models thing, or the methods that people have used in the past, right? Is this one. Right? So even without having read it, you know that this model is what people have been doing. And then they go into model development. Right? So then you know that the third part is going to talk about how their model is better than the NHPP and Poisson mixture models, whatever the hell that is. Right? So again, a good research paper provides you value. Right? A good research paper is valuable. Right? So this research paper, just from structure alone, is clear that what they're doing is that people have been using NHPP, right? Model 1 NHPP, but they're coming up with maybe model 2 and 3, negative binomial model and negative multinomial model, right? Which are probably better than the current model. That's why they get to publish the paper. Right? So just from the structure alone, you know that NHPP is the old model and model 2 and 3 over here are the new models. But you don't know the details yet. You don't need to know it at this point. And then number 4, you go, okay, then it's probably going to show you that model 2 and 3 are probably better than model 1. Right? And then it go into application to demand forecasting. So they probably use it on real data set at some point. Right? And then it goes into conclusion. So just from the structure alone, if you ask me what this paper is about, so again, notice that I have only read the freaking title and then the table of content, basically. If you ask me, hey, Tanwa, what is this paper about? I can bullshit my way out of it. I can say, this paper is trying to come up with a new model to predict hotel booking information using what is called negative multinomial model that is more accurate than the NHPP model that people have been using in the past. 3-minute thesis right there. I won. Okay? That's just from the structure. You already know what the structure is going to be like. You already know what you should be looking for, right? So that's the title. That's the structure. The next thing you're going to read, especially for better paper, are these one, the highlights thing, right? Which is fantastic because it's pretty much all you need to know about the paper, right? You go, this paper is I'm going to collapse the structure. So this paper is investigating key characteristics of hotel booking arrivals. So time varying, high variability, and strong intertemporal correlations. At this point, your level 1 of reading, elementary reading, should go ding, 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 ding. I have no idea what intertemporal means. I have no idea what variability means. Maybe, right? If that's the case, well, go look it up in the dictionary. But if your level 1 is solid, then at this point, you should go, okay. Remember the structure? The structure said, but can I pull it back? Come back? No? I guess not. Yeah, I don't know how to put it back. But remember that the structure was saying that, maybe this one? No? Fantastic. So the structure was saying that they came up with a new model that is better than the old model, right? So just from the key highlights, right? Just from the key highlights, it say, hey, this model investigating key characteristic, and there are three key characteristics over here. So you know immediately that the new model have to be incorporating these 3 factors and only these 3 factors. Right? So maybe the old model doesn't include one of them. Maybe the old model only address 1 of the 3, or maybe 2 of the 3, but not 3 out of 3. So that's why the new model is better. And then you see examining stochastic models to capture essential features of booking arrivals. All right. Maybe you don't know what the word stochastic is. Right. Let's just assume you don't know that. Let's just assume you don't know what the word stochastic means. And then it said this paper suggests a better forecasting method based on stochastic model of booking arrival, right? So right off the bat, you know that this paper is obviously going to be better than the old model, right? And then lastly, you go empirical study using real hotel reservation data for model validation, right? So, this fit perfectly with the structure of the paper, right? You go the characteristic of the models, how the model is applied, how this model is better than the old one, value of this paper, and then apply it to real world data. Right? So again, title, structure, highlights. So just from reading these three alone, which should have taken you, I don't know, like 3 minutes, you already know that this model will be better than whatever was before it, right? And this is better because it takes into account these three factors, right? These three factors. Okay, well, next thing you're going to look at is obviously the abstract, because when we talk about writing the paper, you will know that most people write the whole paper first and then write the abstract last, right? Unlike some of you students who are trying to write your thesis, you try to write your abstract first and then you go into like the body of the paper, which is not the best way to do it. The best way to do it actually is to bounce back and forth, right? You write a little bit of the body, you write a little bit of the abstract, and then you bounce back and forth. But let's not go into that right now. But the abstract is saying this study developed a stochastic approach to the short-term forecasting of hotel booking arrivals. Right? We investigating the key characteristic, key characteristic, right? We saw it up here. So they just basically write it out in a longer format. And then this goes into, we examine 3 Poisson mixture models to capture these salient features of booking arrivals. So you know that the model used this thing called Poisson mixture models, which you probably don't know what it is. Let's assume you don't know what it is, and that's fine. Right? Let's keep going. In particular, the presence of strong intertemporal correlation can be leveraged for forecasting future arrivals based on the early realization. And then they suggest a new forecasting method that exploits the intrinsic correlation between the early and late bookings, and then present validation result of data from a major hotel chain. So then at this point, you go, oh, the intertemporal, this one, correlation, is basically the correlation between the early and the late bookings, right? So early bookings are people who will book hotel way in advance, like months in advance. And late booking are people who will book hotel maybe like a day or two in advance, right? So from just from this alone, you know what they're going to talk about, right? Because they spend a lot of time defining this intertemporal correlation. So maybe model number 2 and number 3 improved on the old model by including the third factor into the model, right? Strong intertemporal correlation, right? And just from that alone, you already know what the model is going to say. So at this point, right, step back a little bit. At this point, if you are a business management student or researcher, and then you go, okay, this paper is probably going to be too hard for me. What could I get out of it? At this point, just from reading the title, the structure, the highlights, and the abstract, which should have taken you, I don't know, 10 minutes, right? At this point, you know that there is a strong correlation between people who book early and people will book really late. Right? So just from the business standpoint, if say people book your hotel for a stay in December and they do it, let's say you want to forecast your Christmas occupancy, right? Christmas, New Year occupancy. You can start looking at that occupancy from your data very early. Right, very early. Those early booking people, maybe you start looking at the data since September, right? Since this month, right? It's 3 months away, but then you're like, oh, by September, how many people book your rooms for December for the Christmas, right? If this year is greater than last year, maybe at the end of the year, you will have more visitors to your hotel because there is a strong intertemporal correlation between early booking and late bookings. So notice just from 10 minutes of reading that paper, just up to the abstract point, I already got useful information out of it, right? So let's dive back. So after the abstract, you go into, obviously skip everything, especially the introduction, right? Don't waste your time on introduction unless you want to read the entire paper front to back, right? So before you go to the conclusion though, since it's usually PDF anyway, just kind of scroll really quickly and just see the structure of the paper, right? And most importantly, just look at the plot, right? Because once we talk about writing papers, you will know that the best way to write a paper is to start with the diagrams, start with the tables, start with the diagrams, right? So most authors will spend an absurd amount of time designing plots and charts and tables, right? So if you see charts and tables and plots, spend some time with it, right? So just glance it over. You don't need to know what it's saying yet. Just kind of see what kind of things involved with the chart, right? Maybe days to stay night, number of daily booking, and then you go, okay, maybe they talk about days and whatnot, and then days and whatnot, and then you see the word mean and variance, so maybe they talk about statistics a little bit, right? And then you keep scrolling, and then you see shit like this, right? You see shit like this that makes you go like, especially if you're not mathematical. But if you're nerdy like me, you go, oh, I would love this paper. But if you're not mathematical, at this point, it should reinforce your belief that this paper will be too difficult for you, right? So there is no way you can read this one from front to back. And in fact, you probably should skip a bunch of portions, like a lot of it. But anyway, keep scrolling down all the way to and then you see this plot, right? And this plot, you see the word sample, model number 1, model number 2, and model number 3. Remember, just from inspectional reading, right, from reading the title, instruction, and whatnot, we know that model 2 and 3 is supposed to be better, right? Model 2 and 3 is supposed to be better because it's the improved version of model number 1. So at this point, you see the word sample and then all the models. So you know that the sample is probably real data, and then model 2 and 3 are probably the newer models, right? And then you can see clearly that just from this plot, that model 2 and 3 are better, right? So you go, the dot lines and this line is better than the X down here in the bottom, right? So at this point, you know that this paper, if everything is correct, that the new models work, right? The new models work. And then you keep scrolling, and then you see this one, and then you go, oh, so this is sample model 2, model 3, the model 3 and the confidence interval, right? So then you know that model 3 works within the confidence interval. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you don't understand statistics, right? If you don't understand statistics, you just go, oh, sample and model 3 look really close to one another, so I guess it works well, right? And then you keep going down to the conclusion, right? And then you read the conclusion, right? So read the abstract, read the conclusion. So let's see what the conclusion say. The conclusion said demand forecasting is critical task. Due to advanced booking nature, reservation profiles are considered as one of the most accurate prognosticators of final room demand. Right. So at this point, even if you don't know anything mathematical at all, just by reading the abstract and the conclusion, you know that advanced booking, so people will book in advance, can give you the reservation profiles at the end of the season, right? So you already got one useful nugget of information for you to use in your thesis or in your research paper, right? Advanced booking can help you determine the final level of booking at the end of the season. Boom, done, useful information, right? And then you can keep reading the conclusion, but it's pretty much that. It just goes into the detail of the difference between the models, and that model 2 and 3, there you go. So model 2 and 3 introducing additional random components, and then it has this like intertemporal correlation thing. Right? So that's inspectional reading, right? That's inspectional reading. So just from inspectional reading, which probably, if I did that without having to talk to you about it, probably should have taken me like 8 minutes, right? So in an hour, if I really want to, I could read like 4 or 5 papers really quickly just to see what they're talking about, right? Inspectional level of reading, not the next level of reading, which we will talk about soon. Right? So that's inspectional level of reading. And let me get you back to the other screen. This one. So that's this level of reading, right? There is another type of inspectional reading, which is called superficial reading, right? This is what you do. So what we were talking about is this thing, systematic skimming, right? Systematic skimming. The other type is superficial reading. This is what you do when you read a newspaper, right? You read newspaper, you can go from the top to the bottom. When you read a novel, you can go top to the bottom because you're not looking for information. You're reading it for entertainment. Right? When you read a piece of news on social media, I'm sorry, you're not reading for information. You're reading for entertainment. Right? In those cases, you can go top to bottom. Right? So unless you want to read your research papers for entertainment, do not go from top to bottom. Right? That's not how it works. The next level of reading is analytical, right? And this is what most of you have been trying to do with all the research papers. You go top to bottom and trying to understand every single equation, every single sentences, every single arguments in a research paper, right? This is what most of you try to do for all research papers, which is absolutely crazy, right? Absolutely crazy. You will never be able to do it. And there's a quote in this article, which I really like, by Sir Francis Bacon. Right? He said, "Some books are to be tasted, others to be swallowed, and some feel to be chewed and digested." Right? So food analogy here, right? Some food you just kind of want to eat quickly. Right? Some food you just kind of want to go on so that you can go back to work. Right? Some food you just kind of want to sit down and enjoy it a little bit. And then there are some meals that you paid a lot of money for in a fancy restaurant that you just want to sit down, relax in a good atmosphere with the people you love and just enjoy the meals, right? Take your time, enjoy the meal, right? Books are like that. Conversations are like that, right? For some conversations, you just want to kind of be done with it real quick. Like, do you want iced tea with your purchase of bottle of water at 7-Eleven, right? In those cases, those conversations are transactional. You want it to be done quick. You just want to be like, I don't want iced tea. Just, let me pay for my shit so I can go away, right? So transactional conversation, you don't want any meaning out of it, right? And then you have the casual conversation that, like, you walk past your friends at university and then you go, "Oh, where you going?" And then your friend be like, "I'm going for lunch." "Oh, where you going for lunch?" And then he's like, "Oh, I'm going to this restaurant." And then you just like, "Okay, have fun." And then you just like say goodbye and then just walk in the opposite direction. So those conversations don't really have any meanings. You just do it because you just want to be friendly, right? You're not trying to find a meaning out of that conversation. You're just trying to be friends, right? Friendly. And then the next level of conversation is when you sit your ass down with your friends and talk about your life's problem, right? For those cases, you don't want to rush through it. You just want to take time and deal with it. Try to understand all the nuances of the life problem that you see in front of you. Right? So reading a research paper is the same thing. For some research paper, for example, the one I just read, maybe I'm not mathematical enough. So what I just want to know is like, well, hey, what do you think? I will not understand how you come up with it, but I can understand what's the result of your thinking, right? So that could be a really quick conversation, inspectional level. Right? But if I really want to go and understand everything, then you want to be talking to this other a lot more times than one. Right? You will spend a lot of time talking to this same person, this same paper, over and over and over and over again, right? And that's an analytical level of reading. Right? In analytical level of reading, the first thing you're gonna do. So this is, like I said, the best type of reading is the most complete form of reading, but it's only possible if you have unlimited time, and it tends to take a heavy toll on the reader. Right? For my PhD thesis, I spent 7 years doing my master and PhD, right? The entire 7 years, there were only 5 papers and 1 book that I did it analytically, right? That I truly understood it from the front to back, right? That's 7 years. So 5 papers and 1 book. So that's pretty much 1 reading a year that I spent time doing it analytically. Right? That's how crazy it is, right? The rest of them, I just kind of go, oh, I understand that part. That part is useful. I will use that. That part is useful. I use that. The rest, I don't really understand. And it's okay because nobody can understand everything. Right? I'm not saying that you can graduate by reading 7 pieces of writing, right? I'm just saying the actual number of reading that you need to do analytically for you to graduate is actually not that big. All right. So for analytical level reading, the key point, I don't know if they coming to terms. They don't use the same terms, but in the book, How to Read a Book, there is this phrase called coming to terms with the other, right? Coming to terms with the other means that you know exactly what the other is talking about every single time, right? All the time, right? So coming to terms means every time you see a word or an equation or a symbol that you don't understand, you need to understand it, right? Maybe you need to go read some other research papers first before you come back to this one, right? It's just like you're having a conversation with this person and she says something that you don't understand at all. So then you have to go talk to another person and be like, hey, I was talking to Sarah and I have no idea what Sarah meant when she said blah, blah, blah. And then John would be like, oh, yeah, Sarah meant this. And then you come back to Sarah and then you go, oh, now I understand what you meant. And then you continue the conversation, right? So that's coming to terms with the others, right? You have to understand everything that the other is saying. So that's analytical reading, right? And then the last one, which I will not touch on yet until almost the very end when we talk about writing and all that, is syntopical reading, right? This is the differentiation between master's level of study and PhD level of study. Like syntopical reading and syntopical understanding of a material is the key that takes you from the master level of study to the PhD level of study. So syntopical, you see the word topic here, right? So sync is like synchronize, right? Like you sync your phone or you sync your iPad or something like that. So sync topic, like synchronizing the topic. That means when you read syntopically, like the last and most advanced level of reading, you don't actually read research paper anymore. You read research, you read a topic, right? And in that topic, you have multiple research papers. You have multiple research papers, right? And what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the others of multiple research papers to talk about one topic. Right? So maybe one research paper talk about hotel demand forecasting. One paper talk about how to do modeling. Another paper talk about guest satisfaction. Right? You want to put all 3 others and try to get them to talk about the same thing. That's syntopical reading, right? And we will not get to that until we start talking about writing and doing more research in future, right? But today, right? Today, what the other thing I want to leave you with is from this example paper. If I can find it. From this example paper, right? So let's say at this point you have done we have done inspectional reading on the paper, right? Let's say you want to go analytical on this paper. What else do you have to do? Well, you have to understand all the terms. If you want to go analytical on this paper, you need to understand what stochastic means. You need to understand what intertemporal means. You need to understand what the frick is Poisson mixture models mean. And then when you go down to the equation part, you need to know what all the equations and parameters mean, right? And that's why analytical reading is so hard. Right? You don't want to do that all the time. It's tiring. It's tiring. Right? All right. But before I leave you for today, because you probably go like, oh, okay, so I guess I don't need to read any paper at all. One thing that I want to come back to is once you're done with inspectional reading, you have two choices, right? You can either go on to analytical reading, or you go back for more inspectional. So at this point, after this paper, the only thing that I have gotten, the one nugget of information that I got out of it, is that early booking is strongly correlated to late bookings. Right? That's one good, useful nugget of information. So I could go back, and now I will start looking at plots. Right? If I want to go back to inspectional and not analytical, I will go back and look at all the plots. For example, this plot is very easy to understand. So this plot is you have on the x-axis, right? You have days to stay night, and then on the y-axis you have number of daily bookings. So what are they plotting here is that day 0 is when the guests arrive. Right? If it's day 60, for example, that means they book the hotel 60 days in advance. Right? They book the hotel 60 days in advance. So from this plot, you see two things, right? You see that the number of early bookings is really small compared to people who are like really late at booking, right? So most people don't start booking hotel until maybe a month in advance, right? Maybe a month in advance over here. And then the other thing that you see is that they give you Monday and Wednesday, and you see different kind of plot, right? So then you know immediately that there is a difference between staying on a Monday at a hotel and staying on a Wednesday at a hotel. Right? And if you go look at the text, it says so implicitly as well. It said the booking curves in one indicate weekly seasonality due to weekend effects as fewer bookings materialize on weekends. Right? What that means is this, right? That means people don't plan for vacation on weekends. People only plan for vacation on weekdays. Isn't that crazy? Right? And that's just from what? That's just from inspectional reading, right? So at this point, even without having read the entire paper, I've known that early booking is strongly correlated to late booking. I know that people don't start booking hotel until a month in advance, and I know that people usually book the hotel on weekdays, not weekends. Right? So those are already three good, useful nuggets of information that I could use. Right? And you could keep on doing that with the rest of the plot, right? Which I will probably leave that as an exercise for you. And if you find anything useful from inspectional reading, just type it out in the comment or line open chat that we have. The other thing I want to leave you with today is that how do you know whether you should go to analytical or not, right? Let's say you read this paper and then you go, oh my God, this paper would be very, very important for my research. But I wonder if I want to go into details, right? Should I go analytical on this ass? Or should I just leave it at inspectional level, right? So usually when I read a paper, not only you have different level of readings, you also have different level of using the paper. So the first level of using is the same as inspectional reading, right? So using paper, using literature. This is my own framework. So again, this is my experience sharing. So you might have a better framework, please share. Or if you don't have any frameworks, try this one. Maybe it works for you. So number one is skimming it, right? Because when you get a research paper, you don't even know whether you want to use it or not, whether it would be useful for you or not. So you just kind of skim it. The second level of using a literature is for you to just use it. Right? This is the level that we were discussing from this example, right? Using a piece of literature means you are just gonna cite the result in your thesis. For example, if I'm writing a thesis on hotel demand forecasting, right, I could be saying that, this example paper by Lee, right, Misuk Lee, that's the author's name. This example paper by Lee clearly showed the effect of weekends. People don't tend to book hotels on the weekends, and people book hotels more on the weekdays. So therefore, for hotel satisfaction service on the website, you should have a website that runs better on the weekdays compared to the weekends. Done, right? You see that I haven't even read the entire paper. I just read the paper here and there, but I can only use nuggets of information from the paper, right? And that's absolutely fine. Especially if you do this for multiple papers, right? If you have 2 or 3 papers saying the same thing, then it's usually probably true, right? I'm not saying this is the most correct way of doing it, but at least this way of doing it means that you can graduate on time, right? And then the third level of doing it is understanding it, right? Why do you want to understand it? You want to understand it because maybe your work is based off of this set of paper, right? So if you compare that to the level of reading, the skimming level is inspectional, right? But some paper, like I said, some paper will be so influential for your work that you want to read it analytically, right? And at this point, this is where you are. You want to understand that paper from the front to the back, because when you go into your thesis defense, some of the assholes in your defense committee will probably pull a result from that paper to ask you. And will be like, hey, how is your study different from that study over there? And you need to understand it front to back, right? For example, an asshole like me will probably be like, oh, yeah, you're doing this topic over here, but I know about this paper that is like super amazing. How are you different from them? You need to be able to defend yourself, right? So that's why you need to read it analytically and understand every single thing about it, right? Every single thing about it. And then the last level, which hopefully you will get it before you graduate your PhD, is once you have read papers, you can synthesize it. And this is how you come up with more research. This is how you come up with more research. And we will talk about this a little bit next week, right? Let's say if you have read a bunch of papers and you want to come up with your own research project, like where do you start, right? So that's next week, right? You read a bunch of papers at different level, both inspectional and analytical. How do you come up with your own research from there, right? So again, 3 weeks ago, we talked about how to access literature. This week, we talk about how to read literature. And next week, we're going to talk about from the literature, how do you find new interesting research projects, right? Cool. All right, so that's pretty much it for today on how to read literature. I don't see any questions except this comment from Ajahn Chantini in a line group. I still read children's book, Dr. Seuss, right? Well, first of all, you have a child, so you're probably reading children's books. Second of all, some children's books are actually really deep, right? And that's stress, and that's a very good example, Ajahn Chantini, of different levels of reading. I challenge you to go back to, I don't know, Alice in Wonderland, right? And when you were young, you probably read it at the inspectional level, right? You read it from the front to the back. And then you're just like, oh, that's enjoyable, right? Now I challenge you to go back, right? And read it analytically, right? Every time something happens, ask yourself why this event happens before the other event. Right? Why did the other put this event over here compared to over there? Why did this character get introduced first before the other character? And if you start doing that, then first of all, you're probably going to get a YouTube channel after that, because you're going to be like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm going to make a video about this, and then make $1 million from being a YouTuber or something. Or second, you're going to improve your skill of reading tremendously. You could do the same thing with research papers as well, right? Try to see the structure, try to see why the others introduce certain elements in the paper before the other one, right? And try to see the logical drawing from that decision of the other, right? It's amazing. So children books are sometimes way, way deeper than we think. Or maybe we're just overthinking it, but it doesn't matter because we enjoy it. Hey, who cares? All right. Anyway, before I leave you, I just want to say that don't get intimidated when I was saying, oh, this paper probably would have taken me 10 minutes, right? because I have spent a lot of years just trying to sharpen my reading skills, and I'm a really, really quick learner. So if you try to inspectional read something and it takes you half an hour, 2 hours, 5 hours for inspectional reading, that is absolutely fine, right? Everyone is at your level, so it doesn't mean you are slow. It just means that is the speed at which you need to do that, right? It's just like running, right? If I say, hey, run as fast as you can, maybe one person runs faster than the other one. Maybe A runs faster than B, but I guarantee you, if both are running as fast as they can, they are both in pain, right? They are both learning, they are both growing, right? So don't be discouraged by the fact that you read slower than the other people, or don't be too happy by the fact that you read faster than the other people. It just everyone is learning. Okay, so don't be discouraged is what I'm trying to say. Don't read a paper and go, oh, I don't understand this. Maybe I'm too stupid to be a master's student or PhD student. No, there's no such thing, right? If you really want to do something, just you will freaking do it, right? It might take you more time, but hey, we all started somewhere. All right, with all that being said, that's my weekly motivational yelling from Tanwa. So again, if you like this content, feel free to visit our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, or scan this QR code to join our line open chat and ask some questions. Tomorrow, I will send you some papers for more reading practices, and I will specifically pick paper that are probably too difficult for most of you to understand. And you get to practice inspectional reading. And then maybe at the beginning of next week video, we will talk about what you could have gotten out of those example papers, right? With all that being said, thank you for joining me today, and I will see you again next week at 1:30 p.m. for GSD with Tanwa Part 2. Wait, hold on. Wrong logo. GSD with Tanwa Part 2, just to get you to be a better researcher, right? All of that, thank you for joining me today. See you next week.